evening, everyone. Class 4 today is going to be about, the first part is going to be Rav Haim Vital, the historical part. Very, very central figure over here, obviously. And let's talk about a little bit Rav Haim Vital, because really Rizal had, we know, Gurei Ari had 10 students, but the main one was Rav Haim Vital, who was the only one who actually was allowed to write down the Arizal's Divrei Torah. The Arizal said, "You're the only one who really understands what I mean." And therefore, only he had permission to write down the Arizal's Sodot. And as a matter of fact, after the Arizal passed away, Rav Haim Vital went to all the students and he collected all the writings from them, whatever notes they had, and he also told them to tell him things that he might not have heard from the Arizal. Now he's a very, very important figure. Where do we get information about Rav Haim Vital? Well, we have the Igot that we use for our general knowledge of the Ari, but also there's a very important book which is Rav Haim Vital's personal diary. It's called Sefer HaChezionot. Sefer HaChezionot means the book of visions. Basically, this is a personal diary that Rav Haim Vital kept before he met the Arizal. And in this book, he records, it would probably be 80% dreams, and he had a lot of dreams, not just dreams, like really, really like paranormal dreams, and also paranormal experiences are all recorded in this book. It seems like he started keeping it from his teens, and he even writes that he didn't record everything. There's a lot of things that he doesn't remember, dreams that he doesn't remember well enough to record them. So a lot of the information that we learn about Rav Haim Vital is from this book, Sefer HaChezionot. Now Rav Haim Vital, he's 8 years younger than the Ari HaKadosh. When the Ari HaKadosh moved to Tzfat at the age of 36, Rav Haim Vital is 28. Okay? And we know that he must have been a very special neshama, a very high neshama, and he talks about that in his book too, that he gets these messages about his neshama being a very, very high neshama. And we know that if the Arizal was sent to this world to teach him, and exclusively him, he must have been someone special. Because we know that Arizal was told in Egypt to make Aliyat Eretz Yisrael and to give everything that he has to Chaim Vital. Because he's like the purpose. He was like, almost, you could see in the book many times that there's a sense that he had the potential of being Mashiach ben Yosef, he even says. So, let's read a little bit about him. The first source we have is before the Arizal gets to Tzfat. Arizal arrived at Tzfat 1570. So, in 1557, 13 years before the arrival of the Arizal, Malchu records, Shnat Shin Yud Zayin LaYitzira Tziva Moreno Rabbi Yosef Kal. So remember, Rav Haim Vital was a student. He got smicha, the real smicha, from the Al-Sheikh HaKadosh, who received his smicha from Rabbi Yosef Kal, Maran HaShulchan Aruch. That's the pshat. In Kabbalah, he was a direct student of the Ramak, of Moshe Kordover. So he, at a very young age, he's already a big mekubal, and he records what Rabbi Yosef Kal and his father. His real name is Calabres, from the city of Calabria in Italy. His father was Rabbi Yosef Calabres, Kotev Tfilin. Apparently, the most pious people in Tzfat only bought their tefillin from his father, Rabbi Yosef Calabres. And he records in Shnat Shin Yud Zayin. Shin Yud Zayin is 1557, 13 years before the arrival of Arizal. Tziva Moreno Rabbi Yosef Karo Zal Lemori Harav Moshe Al-Sheikh. Rabbi Yosef Karo tells his student, the Al-Sheikh, who's teaching Malchu, Beshem HaMalach HaMagid. This is not just Rabbi Yosef Karo giving a blessing, like take care of this guy. The Magid that we spoke about, Rabbi Yosef Karo's Magid, tells Rabbi Yosef Karo to tell the Al-Sheikh HaKadosh to take very, very special care of this student that he has. Shizaher lelamdenu bechol yecholto. You must be careful to teach me everything like in his power. Ki ani u'atid li'isher acharav bedor memale mekomo. Because after Rabbi Yosef Karo's passing, he's the one who's going to stay to take his place. This is just one of many, many different experiences that he records before the arrival of the Arizal. He knew he had a destiny. You see from the diary that he kept, I don't know if he meant to publish his diary, because most of the writings of the Malchut were published by his son, Rav Shmuel Vital. I don't know if he meant to publish his diary, but you see in the diary that he felt that he had a very special mission, and he also got feedback from other people. One of the excerpts we're going to read right now is a month before the Arizal's arrival. He has an experience with this, not a fortune teller, but a woman who sees things. And there are people like this. Like, some people have ability to, I'm not talking about psychics, but people who have ability to really see things. I know of such a person who lives in Petach Tikva. She's not like, you can't find her on the internet. I'll just tell you from my friend's experience, his son came home from Talmud Torah. He's 8 years old, came home with a twitch. Like every 90 seconds, like twitch. Okay? So they took him to doctors, they don't know what's going on, how to stop it. He went to this rabbi in Tel Aviv, or in Bnei Brak. I think he's in Bnei Brak, I'm not sure, Tel Aviv. And he sees things, and he sent him to this woman. This woman, he paid for her cab, she came to Yerushalayim, and after she was done, he didn't have the twitch anymore. So there's people with certain abilities. This is a personal friend of mine who see things, know things. So Malchut says in Shnat Shin Lamed, which is the same year Arizal arrived. Hayta isha chachama medaberet atidot. There was a wise woman who knew how to tell futures, to predict future things. Vegam hayta beki'ah bechochmat tipot hashemen. She was also fluent in something with oil drops. I don't know what this tipot shemen, but apparently it's a way of getting information about paranormal things. V'hayu me'umatim kol dvareh. Everything she used to say used to come true. So she used to be a really reliable person. Vayish'al mimena al hashemen v'lachash. I asked her to tell me through her wisdom with the oil, v'lachash aminag al hasaga v'chochmat hakabbalah. I wanted to know what is going on with me, because he's feeling things. He feels that he has a greater destiny, and he wants to know where his level is in Chochmat HaKabbalah. V'lo yada la'ashiveni. She couldn't answer me. Ad asher lavsha ruach kin'ah, until she suddenly, a spirit of zealous entered her. Ve'hitchazka belechashim, and then she received messages. Ve'kama raglea v'tishak raglai. She started kissing my feet. V'tomer ha'timcholi, forgive me, ki lo hayiti makir et gdulat nishnotcha. I didn't know the greatness of your neshama. Ve'ine encha me'erich neshamot chachmei zador. Your neshama is not from this generation. Ki im midorot harishonim hatanaim, from the Tanaic generations. Ki ma shera'iti b'shemen hazeh. So now she says that she tells him what she saw, the messages that she received. Here's the answer to your question about your level in Kabbalah. They showed me using this oil the following letters, the following message. He gives him these messages, skipping what he says in Shlomo. It says, no one's going to know how to take your potential until a very special pikeach is going to come. He's going to, so basically saying there's someone who's very wise. No one knows how to take the water from this pikeach echad, and another person tied a rope to a bucket. Ve'yarad ve'shata. Kachata choshek v'tzameh lida chochma. So even though he was a Talmid of the Ramak, he wasn't satisfied. He writes that in the diary. He said there has to be more, and he didn't know. And they asked him, like, why aren't you happy with Ramak gave Perush on the Zohar? He says, no, I know there's more. So she's saying there's a thirsty person and he comes down to the well, וצמא לידע חוכמה, אותה נקרא קבלה, ושואל ידע וישיג אותה, and he's going to attain what his thirst is. מה שלא השיג שום חכם, what no one before him was able to receive several generations, מכמה דורות, וזה יהיה על ידי חכם אחד גדול. And this is going to be through another big wise man who's going to come and give him everything. And he says, at the end of that year is when the Arizal came from Egypt. So you see here that before the Arizal comes, he also feels that something's going to happen. He gets a message from this woman who really knows what she's talking about, and he has a tremendous thirst to know. But at the same time, he had no idea at the time when this was given to him that the Arizal is coming. And he had no idea that anyone is coming. He just knew that he's got like a special destiny. And now here's the most dramatic part of his life, when he meets the Arizal. So as we said, the Arizal arrives in 1570. Malchu's been learning by the Ramak. The Arizal joins the Ramak's yeshiva, shiur. A month afterwards, the Ramak passes away. And Rav Haim Vital pays no attention to this stranger who's the Arizal, until he says, maybe I should go talk to him, see who he's from. So let's read at the bottom what he writes. Ve'aya yoshev shisha chodashim. The Arizal was waiting 6 months in Tzfat. Umetzapeh matai yavo mahachu. Mahachu is Moreno Rav Haim Vital. It's slow. He was just waiting for Mahachu to come to him. V'yigvakesh mimenu shiachniseu bechadrei chokhmah. So that he'll ask him, give me the access to the inner chambers. Ki lo ratza ha'ari lirdof acharav, lekayem asher ne'emar, im ta'iru, v'im te'oreru et ha'ava shetachpaz. Arizal didn't pursue him because he wanted him, from his own thirst, to awaken the higher wisdom. Because when a person is thirsty for something, it also does something above. U'malchu lo yachshiv oto. Malchut didn't even consider the Arizal more than him. The Adraba, on the contrary, הוא חשב שהוא יותר חכם בחוכמת הקבלה ממנו. עד שלאחר זמן השישה חודשים, until after 6 months of the Arizal spending time in Tzfat. עלה בדעתו ללך אל הארי, said, let's go check him out, ולתהות בקנקנו. Let's see who this guy is and if he knows something. איך יפרש מאמר אחד שכבר היה מפורש? How is he going to explain a מאמר in the Zohar that Rav Haim Vital thought he knew? ותכף כשבא אל הארי זה, לא בא כי אם ליטות בקנקנו. So the Arizal told him, אמר Ari knew that this guy's coming just to test him. כיוון ששאל אותו מלכו מאמר אחד, he just asked him this מאמר, מיד התחיל הארי לומר בתוכו סודות נפלאים שרמזם רשב"י. He started telling him all these סודות that Rashbi intended. אשר לא שמעתן אוזן אדם מעולם, that never these secrets were heard in the world. וכיוון ששמע מלכו אותן, הרזין העליון כמעט שיצא נפשו. He almost fainted. This blew him away. אחר כך שאל אותו מאמר אחר. Then he asked him a different מאמר. והאריזל פתח לו פתחים של אורה עד שדמה בעצמו לפני הארי כשועל. Suddenly he realized, this guy is I'm like nothing compared to this guy. וכלא חשיב ידע. אחר כך התחיל לשאול מאמר אחר. השיב לו, עד כאן תחום שבת. The Arizal said, that's it. I can't reveal anything to you. And then he says, I can't, you're not worthy, you're not fit for me to reveal more to you. And then he went completely depressed. מיד יצא מלפניו בפחי נפש, ונכנס בביתו, ולבש שק. He took his clothes off, he put sackcloth on. והשליך עצמו מלוא קומתו בתוך האפר. He set himself to the ground, וצעק ובכה בחייה גדולה עד מאוד. וביקש רחמים מלפני הקדוש ברוך הוא שיתנהו לכן ולחסד בעיני האריזל שימסור לו סתרי תורה. So he was completely devastated that the Arizal didn't want to teach him. He prayed to Hashem, he did ta'aniyot, he cried, ולן בתענית ושק ולמחר בא אל הארי ונפל על פניו. He dropped to the floor ונשק לו ידיו ורגליו. He kissed his feet and hands והתחיל לבכות. He started weeping like a baby. ולהתחנן ואמר לו למען השם אלוהי ישראל, for the sake of Hashem, נא אל תשיבני ריקה, don't leave me empty, ואל תעזבני ואל תרחיקני ממך. אמר לו האריזל, האפר של אתמול שהפרת בך, the fact that what you did yesterday when you went home and you threw yourself to the dust, he like knew this without him even telling him, הועיל לך, it actually did something. ועל מנת כן התכוונתי. This is why I pushed you away. שלא לגלות לך עוד, מכאן ואילך אל תפחד, כי אני אלמדך הכל. I'm going to teach you everything that you need to know and want to know. וגילה לו כל מה שנאמר לו במצרים. He also told him everything that was given to him in Mitzrayim, including the fact that he was sent here for him. And like we know that Arizal told him that anything that he will ask, Arizal must tell him. That was part of what Eliyahu told Arizal. So from this point on, basically Arizal already spent 6 months in Tzfat. He only lived 2 years in Tzfat, a little bit more. And if you knew the Chokhmah that Rav Haim Vital wrote in the volumes of Etz Chaim alone, forget the other books. There's Shar Gilgulim, there's Shar Kavanot, there's Mamarei Rashbi, there's Hakdamot, there's Shari Psukim. Without a Perush, this stuff, just to learn one book, for someone who's on a high level, 2 years is not enough for one book. So he basically had 1 year and 10 months to learn everything from the Arizal. And the Chida writes in Shem HaGdolim, Bo'u re, shekol ha-chokhmah lamad b'shana ve'eser chodashim. All the chokhmah that he got from the Arizal was only in a year and 10 months. V'hu lepele. It's a wonder. So how did he do it? Ach kvar noda she'arav hishkar lemarchu mebe'er shel Miriam beyam Tveres. So there's a midrash that says in Midrash Tanchuma that Be'era shel Miriam followed the Jews into Eretz Yisrael and settled in Tiberias. Right? And Malchu, the story is, and Malchu revealed this himself, that the Arizal took him on a boat because he saw he wasn't getting it. This is too much, like he's not getting everything. He took him on a boat, and where this Be'era shel Miriam is located, we actually know the location. How do we know the location? It's been passed down. Rav Kaduri he took people. It's every Rosh Chodesh. I was in a synagogue called Etz Chaim in Tveria. It's on the Tayelet. And this synagogue was built by Rabbi Chaim Abulafia from the 1700s. It's an amazing story about him as well, but this is not the time. And he built this synagogue, and between the posts of the Teva, of the Chazan, 800 meters into the Kinneret, because it's sitting right on the Kinneret, that's where Be'era shel Miriam is. I was going to say, if you guys don't get it, at some point in the shiur, we'll take a boat ride. We'll fill up a few bottles. Anyways, and he basically takes him on this boat, and it's only on a certain time in the month. I think it's Rosh Chodesh. And I actually spoke to the gabbai of the synagogue that Shabbat, and he said there's bubbles. It bubbles. He said, I've seen it with my own eyes, because he used to be a fisherman. Anyways, he said...
What side of the Kinneret is this?
This is on the near the Tayelet. Don't try this at home.
No, but on the Tveria side?
On the Tveria side. And basically, after this, he basically gave him a cup to drink from Be'era shel Miriam. So the fact that there's Be'era shel Miriam, that's brought down in Midrash Tanchuma. It's not that Arizal's, he didn't make it up. But the fact that he took him there, and he gave him to drink there, and from that point on, his understanding opened up. This is what the Chida writes over here, Rav Chaim David Azulai. Ve'yashva chokhmah bekirbo. He was able to retain the chokhmah. Ubetzeruf nishmato ha'elyona. Not only because it wouldn't work for just anyone, because he had such a high neshama. Ve'harav hakadosh hamelamed leho'il zchuto yagenenu. In other words, this is the explanation how he was able to retain in a year and 10 months. This is not like a shas. If I were to tell you someone learns shas for the first time in a year and 10 months, you'd say, impossible. So I'm telling you, this is like 5 times shas, 10 times shas. Because it's not only volume, the depth is like, it's not from this world. So the fact that he was able to learn it is not something natural. Now the Arizal, after a year and 10 months, passed away. We'll talk about that separately. But Rav Haim Vital continues to see the Arizals in dreams after he passes away. If you can see the next excerpt from Sefer HaChezionot, he writes just how many times he had these dreams from the Arizal. Achar shlosha yamim sheniftar mori. 3 days after his passing. Re'itiv b'chalom. I saw him in the dream. שאלתי ממנו, איך נפטר כל כך בחטיפה? How is it that he died so young? ויאמר לי, לפי שלא מצאתי אפילו אחד שלם כרצונו. Because I didn't find even one tzaddik in this generation that I needed. אמרתי לו, אם כן חס ושלום, אתייאש מכל מה שהבטחתני. Since חס ושלום, then I'm not worthy and all you promised me is not going to come true. מכל הטובה שאמרת לי שעתידה לבוא בעולם על ידי. אמר לי, אל תתייאש. כי בהגיע הזמן אני אבוא אליך ואגלה לך את אשר תעשה, ויקץ. And then he said, I woke up. And listen to what he says this. This is unbelievable. ומאז ואילך, from that point forward, רוב הלילות היה נגלה עליי בחלום. Most of the nights, I would see him in the dream. לנחמני, to console me, שלא אתייאש. וזה נמשך עד 20 שנה. It's 20 years. For 20 years, most of the nights, he sees that Arizal in his dreams. Now, what do you think he's showing him in the dreams? I think he's also teaching him. He's not just showing him, like, how cool it is over here. He's still teaching him from the other side for 20 years. And me'az, after 20 years finished, ad 10 shanim, for the next 10 years after the 20 years, lo haya ba ki im pa'am achat b'chodesh. He would visit me once a month. Umikan va'elach, and after that period, ba pa'am achat mishalosh l'shlosha chodeshim, once every 3 months. ובכל החלומות שאני חולם עמו תמיד הוא באופן אחד. כי מלמדני תורה ומנחמני שלא אתייאש. So he's doing two things. He's teaching him Torah and he's also giving him a soul that he's not mityash. This explains a lot about really Rav Chaim's knowledge. Even though the Etz Chaim was completed 15 years after the passing of that Rizal, but he still gets the teachings. They still go after the passing away, and it could be that these were even incorporated in the writings of that Rizal. That it's not just based on what he learned before he passed away. It could be that it was even based after he passed away. Now, what happens to Rav Haim Vital is basically that Rizal dies at the age of 38. Rav Haim Vital, 5 years after the passing of that Rizal, in the dreams, Arizal tells him, you have to move to Yerushalayim at some point, but I will tell you when. You don't have Reshut yet. Something happens in Tzfat, he sees certain things, and then he moves 5 years later in the month of Kislev to Yerushalayim.
With permission?
With permission. And he also, I didn't record all these stories, but basically he had a dream where basically the Arizal tells him the permission had been granted. Now listen to what happens in Yerushalayim. He's in Yerushalayim for not a long time, just a few years, and he goes from Yerushalayim to Damascus, back to Tzfat, and from Tzfat to Damascus. This is where he passed away, in Damascus. But how did he get from Yerushalayim to Damascus? I think the pshat is that he went from Yerushalayim to Damascus, then back to Tzfat, and then back to Damascus. And he died over 80 years old. When he was in Yerushalayim, he writes this in Sefer Chezionot, and it's also brought down in the Igrot of Shlomo. There was in the old city, like in the Ir Shel David, you have what's called Mei Gichon. You have the water tunnels, that you go pay and you walk up to your knees in water. Those are called Mei Gichon. Now, there was an Arab ruler by the name of Abu Saifan. Abu Saifan was in charge of the area of Yerushalayim. He was in control. He's part of the Ottoman Empire. And he basically hears one day that there's underground, that there's water. And there was a big water shortage in Yerushalayim. Now, we know through our tradition in Talmud that Chizkiyahu HaMelech Satam Mei Gichon. He actually blocked access to this water. Why? Because when Sancherib was coming with his armies, he didn't want Chizkiyahu, the army, to have water supply. So he blocked it. And the rabbis disapproved of what he did. They said 6 things Chizkiyahu did. 3 they disapproved of, and 3 they approved of. The 3 that they disapproved of was Satam Mei Gichon. Another thing is that he did is he gave one of the
Not married.
what?
Not married.
No, those aren't part of this. That's a different thing.
Sefer Refuot.
Sefer Refuot is Gonez. That's actually a good thing he did. Kitet Nachash Nechoshet. That was a plus. Anyways, one of the things that he didn't do, according to the rabbis correctly, is Satam Mei Gichon. So this Abu Saifan, here's water, and he asks his people, there's water here. We need water. Who can open this? They said no one can. People have tried. There's only one person who could do this. There's a very godly Jew rabbi who lives in Yerushalayim. He has ability to do supernatural things. He could do it. So on his way to the Misgad, on Friday, he turns to Malchu, and he tells Malchu, listen, I'm going to the Misgad. When I come out by Shabbat tomorrow, I want this thing open or you're dead. To Malchu. Now, Malchu said, he could have done it, I'm not doing it. And he used Shmot Kodesh. He used special names, godly names, and he had a travel, kvitzat derech, like a express travel to Damascus. He was in Damascus. Don't ask how, not by camel, not by foot. Now, when he's in Damascus, the Arizal appears to him in a dream, and he said, you messed up. You don't understand. You were supposed to open that water to rectify what Chizkiyahu Melech did, because part of your neshama is connected to Chizkiyahu Melech. And Abu Saifan, the name in Arabic, Abu Saifan is like Baal HaSaif, Sancheriv. He was a reincarnation of Sancheriv. You had an opportunity to fix it. He said, but I didn't want to because I had to use Kabbalah Ma'asit. I had to use Shemot Kodesh. And I didn't want to because you're not supposed to. Well, then Arizal said, yeah, if that was true, why did you use it to travel to Damascus? So he said, okay, I'll go back and do it. He said, it's too late. If you would have done it, Mashiach would have come. Basically said. Anyways, this happened to him after he moved to Damascus. There's many of these stories that he has with Arizal. So, Ad Khan.
Did he go back?
First part. No, he never went back to Yerushalayim. That was it. So this is the first part. Let's move now to the second part of the shiur. So basically, we spoke last time about the Soda Tzimtzum, right? The Tzimtzum is the contraction. And we explained that you're not supposed to take any of this stuff like in terms of space, physical space, like Hashem removed himself from physical space, because we're not talking about a dimension of physical space. Whenever I think about, spirituality and trying to fathom, imagine what the world would look like, right, if you took away all the planets and Earth and you were just out in space, right? Would there be any physical space? No, probably not, right? There isn't anything, right? So, part of the Tzimtzum we said is basically, we're supposed to understand it, it's basically Hashem's presence is concealed. But there's two types of hanhagot. There's two types of divine governance that are governing all of reality. One is in the form of igulim, we said, circles, and one is, we said, a straight line, a kav. The Arizal doesn't spend a lot of time on the igulim, but basically what we're supposed to take from this, the igulim, is there's a hanhaga in this world, and if you notice, everything is round. The world is round, your head is round. There's no squares around here. Everything is round, right? What is Hanagat Igulim? It's basically, like we said, take for example, nature. Natural laws, they function equal to everyone. They don't change. They're not really in our control. Hanagat Igulim is saying that there's an aspect of reality, spiritual and both physical, where everything is really static. And this is not our sugya in this world. We're not here to change it, okay? And there's parts of that in our soul as well that we're not here to work on. And then there's Hanagat HaYosha, right? Hanagat HaYosha is what we said, like the straight line, where we're shown that there's good, bad, there's up, down, there's different madrigot, there's things that we can change. And this is what we deal with when Arizal writes. All of his writings is within this dimension of Hanagat HaYosha. So let's read Seif Aleph. הצמצום של האינסוף יוצר מציאות של הסתרה של האור. So the tzimtzum, the contraction, gives rise to concealment of the divine. בשני מיני הנהגות הנקראות עיגול ויושר. Right? And then there's basically, within this tzimtzum, there's two types of hanagot. Igul, one in the form of a circle, which we said, ויושר. המציאות של העיגולים היא הנהגה שבה יש חיות לעולמות ולנבראים בשווה. So the Hanagat Ha'igul is like, there's sustenance, there's life, everybody gets food, everybody gets oxygen, בשווה. ללא קשר למעשיהם, without any קשר to their deeds, אלא יש חיות שהיא קבועה ואינה משתנה. לעומת זאת, הנהגת היושר מבטאת השתלשלות של האור. So הנהגת היושר is basically that the light comes in to existence in a way which depends on the receivers. והנהגה שיש בה מדרגות רבות מלמעלה למטה, ויש מצבים שיש יותר גילוי של האור, there's times where there's more revelation of the light, או פחות בהתאם לנבראים. If you want to look at so at Seif Bet, before we turn to the diagram to see what this looks like conceptually. This is conceptual. Everything is conceptual. It's not physical. Keep reminding yourself. It's not physical, it's conceptual. Bet. החלל של הצמצום. So this contraction basically creates what's called Olamot. Olamot are worlds, dimensions. This is like the inner space, the conceptual space, as Rav Aryeh Kaplan refers to, conceptual space. And they're called Abiyah. Abiyah is Atzilut, Bria, Yetzira, Asiyah. The four Olamot. The one before Atzilut, Arizal doesn't spend a lot of time talking about because this is like basically a dimension where the roots, the pre-roots start. It's called Adam Kadmon. And these four basically correspond to the four-letter name. So just so you know, you see this everywhere. The four-letter name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, basically has a macro and a micro. The macro is that when we talk about God's name, we'll see later what the different names are and what they mean, but basically the source of light is manifest in letters, in Shem Hashem. So when we say that the entire existence is light and it's concealed, the source of light is actually in the name. When you read the Ramban's Hagdama to the Sefer Torah, he basically brings down that all of the Torah is just Shmot Kodesh. It's all Shmot Kodesh, everything. So when we take the letter Yud, in the macro, Yud corresponds to world of Atzilut, Hey corresponds to the world of Bria, Vav corresponds to the world of Yetzirah, and Hey, Asiyah. Let's look at the backside. Look at this diagram, just so you see like an illustration of the order of the worlds. So we have the circles, that's the Hanaga that we said we were not going to discuss. And then you have a line, the Ishtalshalut, that's coming down from the Ein Sof all the way to where we are at the bottom. And the light over here travels basically through different madrigot. But if you look at the circles, what do they mean? What do these circles mean? So you have, like, for example, it says, if you look at the outermost circle, that's like, for example, an illustration of like the Ein Sof, right? And then you have Asara Igulei Ak. Ak stands for Adam Kadmon. That's like the primordial world. And then Atik, Arich. These are all different layers of the four worlds. But what you notice, you get to the bottom, the center, you get to Asiyah. So if you go from the center up, it goes from the lowest world, which is called the world of action, which we'll talk about, Asiyah, and then above that Yetzirah, then above that Bria, and then you have 5 layers of Atzilut, which we'll talk about, and then Adam Kadmon. So how can you understand, to conceptualize this? Adam Kadmon is basically the whole picture. That's like, if you look at existence, it's the paper. Everything is in it. But it's the most hidden out of everything. Basically, the light there is the most concealed it can be. Adam Kadmon. And within Adam Kadmon, you have, this is what the picture is meant to illustrate. It's one inside the other. So don't look at it like physical space. Look at it as pnimi v'chitzoni. Inner, outer. The most inner world, most pnimi you can get is Adam Kadmon. Right? And there the Arizal doesn't even talk about. And the most outer, lowest world is Olam Asiyah. In this diagram, it looks like, because you're looking at it from a physical, like an architect, but it's the opposite. The most outer world, the lowest world, is Olam Asiyah. Which one? It's the most visible one, right? The least spiritual out of all of them. And the Adam Kadmon is the one that's most concealed. So let's just talk briefly about these worlds, because we just need to know the structure before we talk about anything. This is just part of the introduction. In Gimel, we have the name Adam Kadmon. This is like the first thing that when the Ein Sof starts, Lihishtalshel, it starts like coming from the highest place to the lowest. It starts in Adam Kadmon. And why is the word Adam used? Because everything in the when we talk about the Yosher, the Hanagata Yosher, we said Igulim, it's in the form of a human. That's why it's called Adam Kadmon. The physical body, how we're structured, a pisod, when it says Betzelem Elohim bara oto, that's what it means. It means that there's a spiritual man, and he, the spiritual man, he's created in God's image. So whenever we talk about the worlds, you have to understand that the human body is a reflection of the Adam Elyon. That's why it's called Adam Kadmon. And so the Adam Kadmon, basically from the feet to the head, if we use physical terminology, he's basically the entire halal. He's the entirety of the existence and concealment.
Is that what it means that Adam is showing his toes in the clouds over his here on the ground? It's extended all the way.
Yeah, it could mean that. So Kadmon is because it's like the first. Then this is the main world that we start with, Olam Atzilut. Now you should just know that out of all the Mekubalim, and this is what's unique about that Rizal, he was the first and only one to touch this dimension called Olam Atzilut. Did it exist in the Zohar? Of course, but nobody knew about it. No one made this seder and described the infrastructure of these worlds like the Arizal. Nobody. There were some Mekubalim who spoke about it, but he's the one who described it almost in a scientific, molecular level. What happens in this world, like all the dynamics of this world. Now the word Atzilut, called emanation, comes from the Hebrew word etzel. What does it mean? Vaya'atzel min haruach. It says Moshe, when he made other prophets, he gave from his own. This world is called Atzilut because in this world, the Ein Sof's light is basically one with him. Meaning that there's no separate entity. There's only complete oneness in this dimension. There's no good and bad. There's no klipot, as we call it klipot, layers of impure forces, and there's no duality. As the Zohar says, Ihu vechiyohi chad. Ihu vegarmoi chad. Translation: him, the creator, vehachiyut, and the light are one. Galmohi, meaning the vessels that clothe the light, echad. And this is Sod Etz HaChaim. In Olam Atzilut, you don't have two. You don't have duality. You just have one. You have complete Or that has what's called degrees of light that are lower and higher, called vessels, Or and Kelim. We'll talk about what Or and Kelim means. But the idea here is that there's no two. There's nothing to. Everything is complete oneness, and that's why it's called Atzilut from the word Etzel. Like Hashem is like Etzel, Etzlo. It's like Hashem is the Ein Sof's light is there. The world beneath that is called Bria, the world of creation. We know the word Bria in Hebrew means livro. Livro means, as opposed to Yetzirah, means yesh mi'ain, ex nihilo, something from nothing. This word is used to describe Olam HaBriah because this is where you start having duality. You start having more than one. Or at least you have, from our end, we see more than one. This is where the root of free will starts in Olam HaBriah. Good and bad. Although most of this world is considered tov, little bad, but duality. It starts in Olam HaBriah. And that's why it's called Briah, because it's as if it's a separate entity from Hashem. From our perspective, not in reality. From our perspective, it looks like something on its own. Now, this world is also called Olam HaKiseh. When we speak about in Shacharit, when we speak about the Chayot HaKodesh, and we speak about angels, Olam HaKiseh is a word that's referencing Olam HaBriah. Why? Because Kiseh HaKavod is in Olam HaBriah. Now, presumably, why Kiseh? Because the Kiseh is where the king sits. So Olam HaTzilut would be the king, from our perspective, because Ein Sof we don't even talk about. Ein Sof is out of bounds. We don't talk about Ein Sof. We don't even have a name for Ein Sof. It's called Ein Sof, because you can't even talk about it. From our perspective, the closest thing to Hashem is in Olam HaTzilut, right? And that's like the king. Olam HaKiseh is Olam HaBriah. It's like where the king sits. And the chariot that Ezekiel saw is in this dimension, Olam HaBriah. And there's 4 wheels, right? And there's Chayot HaKodesh, which we'll talk about where they are. But Olam HaBriah, what characterizes it is basically it's the beginning of duality and free will and good and evil. And the sod of this is Etz HaDa'at Tov V'Ra. Meaning Etz HaDa'at Tov V'Ra and the Torah that has also Mutar V'Asur, Tahor, Kadosh, Tameh, all this is connected to this level. It's called Torat HaBriah, not Torat HaAtzilut. Because in Torat HaAtzilut, which Malchus says is Chokhmat HaKabbalah, that's connected to Atzilut. There's no machloket there. There's no no kal v'chomer. There's just complete oneness. And this is why Olam HaTzilut is reached in a different type of consciousness than Olam HaBriah. Olam HaBriah is generally connected to the faculty called Binah, whereas Olam HaTzilut is connected to what's called Chokhmah. Chokhmah and Binah are 2 different mental capacities. Chokhmah is something that you get through consciousness, beyond mind, not trying to control it and control it. Intuition. That's Binah. Binah is connected to Olam HaBriah. It's connected to the Hey in the Yud Hey Vav Hey, the Yud, which corresponds to Atzilut. That's Chokhmah. And Olam HaBriah is basically clothing. It's the next level after Olam HaTzilut. But each of these worlds, you should know, what this diagram illustrates that we saw, illustrates a relationship between the Olamot. It's not physical space. It's a relationship that the one that's most outer, Chitzoni, is basically inside the one that's before it, actually acts according to the world that's above it. So if Olam HaTzilut, if things are happening there, that activates something in the world that's beneath it, right? In Olam HaKiseh. And if something is happening in Olam HaKiseh, you'll see it in Olam HaYetzirah. And if something's happening in Olam HaYetzirah, you'll see it in Olam HaAsiyah. So this illustrates a relationship which each dimension acts in accordance to the world above it. The 4 ministering angels in this world, Rashi Tevot Argaman. Argaman, Uriel, Raphael, Gabriel, Michael, Nuriel. But there's actually 4 main ones. These 4 main ones, each one of them is in charge of 70 angels in the world beneath, which is called Olam HaYetzirah, which will go there, the world of formation. Olam HaYetzirah from the word litzor. Litzor means to create something from something. This name is given to this dimension to tell us that in this world, it's not like a separate entity. It's just a spin-off of Olam HaBriah. Olam HaBriah is the first and only world that has like a separate, from our perspective, a separate existence. Olam HaYetzirah is actually completely under the Hanhaga of Olam HaBriah.
Formation.
The world of formation. Why is it called Yetzirah? Because angels, this is also called Olam HaMalachim. Now what is a malach? A malach is a shaliach. In biblical terminology, a malach is a shaliach. Vayishlach Yaakov malachim. So the angels basically just form the spiritual realities that come from Olam HaBriah. They are the ones who form, it's formed in the angel. The angel is actually the messenger of the spiritual reality that's been created from above. And it could be a destructive angel. It could be a angel that's everything that's happening here is happening through different messengers. That's Olam HaYetzirah. That's real.
כן, פה, אבל זה שמה.
Back after the siren, we were in Olam HaYetzirah. So we said this is called Olam HaMalachim, and there's 70 ministering angels in Olam HaYetzirah. In this world, good and evil, Tov Vera, are basically chetzi. It's not like Olam HaBriah where we said it's mostly good and some evil. Olam HaYetzirah is basically chetzi Tov Vera. And then we get to Zayin Olam HaAsiyah, the world of action. Now you might think that Olam HaAsiyah means Olam Hazeh. So it really doesn't. Olam Hazeh is a small fraction of Olam HaAsiyah. Olam HaAsiyah is actually a spiritual world. It's called Olam HaAsiyah because it's the most megusham, it's the least spiritual of all of them. But it's completely spiritual, the main part of Olam HaAsiyah. There's angels. There it says, Olam HaAsiyah Ruchani Nikra HaOfanim. This is called Olam HaOfanim, the wheels on the chariot. That Sheshama Malachim Nikrim Ofanim. There's the angels that are called Ofanim, like the lowest angels. Sham Hara Merube Alatov. In Olam HaAsiyah, evil is more than good. There's more klipa, there's more of the peel than there is kedusha. There's nothing in Olam HaAsiyah which is not made of kedusha and klipa together. Then we talk about our world, meaning the physical world, that has 4 elements: water, fire, wind, and dust. And this is where things actually come to fruition physically. So, in other words, when we talk about Gan Eden HaTachton, right? When a person passes away, we see a lot of excerpts in the Zohar talking about Gan Eden. It says a person's neshama goes to Gan Eden HaTachton. And Adam HaRishon was in Gan Eden, right? These places are in Olam HaAsiyah, but not in Olam HaZeh, but in Olam HaAsiyah. They're spiritual places in this dimension called Olam HaAsiyah.
Is that the inner world or something? That's the inner world under the earth or something like that?
No.
עכשיו משהו קורה
There's nothing physical about it.
בעולם
There's no
האצילות.
physicality of under, over. Something spiritual
חזק,
that's
משהו חזק.
beyond time and space. So Olam HaAsiyah is also spiritual, and corresponding to these 4 dimensions, in Chet we have the parts of the soul, Nefesh, the lowest, corresponding to Olam HaAsiyah, Ruach, corresponding to Olam HaYetzirah, Neshama, corresponding to Olam HaBriah, and Chaya, corresponding to Olam HaTzilut, and Yechidah is like Adam Kadmon. In other words, different parts of the soul can come from different dimensions, depending on the person, depending who the person is, how he was born. One person can have a neshama from Olam HaAsiyah, and another person can realize his potential in life, and he could get a neshama from a higher place based on what he's doing in this world, from a different world. So when we talk about the parts of the souls, they can come from different levels within these 4 worlds. So this is basically the framework. We talk about the worlds. This is important to know because before we talk about Sfirot, we have to know where the Sfirot are. Before we talk about what the Sfirot are, we have to know where we're operating. These are like the 4 levels. The Arizals and everything that he wrote is basically just Olam HaTzilut. He doesn't talk almost about very, very small information about Olam HaBriah and Olam HaYetzirah and Olam HaAsiyah. Mostly he's focused on Olam HaTzilut. The different Hasidic rabbis and different people who, taught mysticism didn't talk about Olam HaTzilut. No one had any hasaga in Olam HaTzilut. They spoke about Briah, maybe Yetzirah and Olam HaAsiyah, but the only one who really spoke about Atzilut is the Arizal, and this is basically what we focus on in this course is Olamot Tzilut, and what happens there in the structure of Olamot Tzilut, and how the relationship between the Torah and the Tefillah and the Mitzvot to this Olamot Tzilut, where everything takes place, where there's like complete oneness. So B'ez Hashem, next time we'll continue this and speak about the Sfirot. What are the Sfirot, and what are the Parzufim, personifications? But we have to first, this is like the layout, we have to know what field we're talking about before we go into Sfirot. All right? See you next time.